My name is Joyce Bok. I'm the events organiser for Salubrious Events. And today I have here with me Robb Tilley from Sydney. It's the 8th of February. And Robb Tilley is a real-life Ghostbuster. So he has been doing this sort of work for over 30 years and relieving many people from the sufferings of hauntings. Robb, hello.
Hi.
Welcome. So first question, Robb, how did you get into doing this sort of work?
What happened, I was at an AIPR meeting at the Australian Institute of Parapsychological Research meeting, and the then President, Dr. Michael Huff from University of Sydney, said we'd had several letters from people asking if we could help them with their haunted house problems. And he asked if anyone wanted to learn how to do this. And I thought, I'll have a go at that. So I put my hand up. And so then Mike Huff gave me the names and phone numbers of half a dozen people who knew how to clear haunted houses. And I went and watched what they did. I went and worked with them. And there's several different ways of doing it. So I was immediately struck by how effective it was. And I just had to understand, to learn what's going on, because it's rather mind-boggling in its strangeness. But eventually I found one technique which worked best for me, suited my style better, and so over time I've just gained a lot of experience. It is a very different, very strange logic. It's entirely different theoretical framework from any other type of psychology. But it's very effective. So.
Oh, that's very interesting, Robb. What sort of psychological framework? I had to ask. Does it operate from?
Yeah, well, you're talking about stuff that happens in another reality. It's a real event in consciousness. So if you're psychic, you can see what I can see. But if you're not psychic, you don't get it. You don't see anything. You've no idea what's going on. And then when it was all new to me, I just remembered, because I did psychology briefly at University of Sydney. I remember the first class there was our lecturer said, it's all very confusing, but at the end of the first year, it'll all come together and you'll see how it all fits together and it all makes sense to you. So using that logic, I thought, I don't understand how these people are clearing haunted houses, but if I stay with it long enough, it'll all make sense to me. And sure enough, that's what happened.
Okay, wow. Do you remember your very first job of clearing?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. The first job I ever did was with the late Marilyn Campling. She changed her name later to Marilyn Newman when she remarried. And she and her control, Harry, Marilyn was a trance medium. So we went to this house out in Bankstown in Sydney. And I'd never met Marilyn before. We just arranged over the phone to meet at this house at a time and met with the family there. And Marilyn walked into the house and described straight away who was haunting the place, and it turned out it was the people, the previous owners of the house, were a Slavic couple, and they had a huge emotional attachment to this house. It was the sum total of their life's achievements, and the family noted that when they would go away for a holiday for a while, when they came back, the haunting and poltergeistry was a lot worse. Because I think what was happening was when the family was away on holiday, the Slavic couple thought, we got our house back to ourselves again. And of course, when the family come back, they get angry. And what had happened is the one thing the husband told me, he was an engineer, and he said the curtain pelmet in the bedroom had been ripped out of the wall on 2 or 3 occasions, and he put it back. And then one time he was making the bed and somebody touched him on the back side, and he turned around and there was nobody there. So
Wow.
he was finally convinced that we better get somebody out here to do something about this.
Okay.
So Marilyn went into a trance and her eyes rolled back and she'd lay on the bed in the bedroom, and Harry's got her under control, and I'm pretending that I know what I'm doing. And of course I didn't. And the family are freaking out because we'd only met this family 15 or 20 minutes earlier, and here's this woman in a trance in the bedroom.
Wow.
And so,
like the movies?
Yeah, it was pretty intense. So anyway, Marilyn cleared the place, and I phoned the woman phoned me a few days later and said, yeah, it's all stopped. And I checked weeks later, and all the poltergeist and haunting had finished. So, but the woman said to me about Marilyn Newman, I never want that woman in my house ever again. So I think her going into a trance in the bedroom really freaked the family out. So I thought, well, I'm not going to use that technique.
Oh wow, yeah, sounds like she did get very freaked out.
It was strange.
But she was relieved that...
Yeah, it worked.
It worked?
It worked, yeah.
Wow.
It was totally effective. And I did several other jobs with Marilyn, several other jobs, which I wrote about in a paper in the Australian Journal of Parapsychology in 2002. And we did several other jobs around the place. And again, the women, after the house was cleared, all had that same response of, I never want that woman in my house ever again. So, you know, it's all right being a trance medium, but if you go into some stranger's house and do it, it is quite distressing.
Right. Wow. That's really interesting. So did it just take the one go at it?
Oh yeah. It was effective straight away. So I did half a dozen jobs with Marilyn, and I got a chance to work with other people, and they had easier techniques. But the fellow that impressed me the most was the late Simon Wildsmith, because he would just turn up to a haunted house job with jacket and tie, and there's no drama, there's no excitement. He just walks in and scans the place with his mind. And he said the good spooks arrive. You could feel when they came into the house, there's a sort of vortex of energy would spin around the room, make your head spin. And I got familiar with that, and I thought, that must be the good spooks arriving. So Simon would just be talking to the family and answering their questions and reassuring them while the good spooks clear the place.
Right.
So there's no drama. It's all very calm and orderly.
So a very different way.
Totally effective.
Of working.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Well, that would suit me. If I could, that would suit me better to work that way, because that way you got the good spooks doing the clearing. I'm not really involved. I'm just part of a team. I'm there answering questions and reassuring people. And I've got divided consciousness. So while I'm paying attention to what the spooks are doing, I'm also answering the questions from the family. So that seemed to me like the best way to work. That suits me best anyway.
I see. Yes. So clearing without the drama of the rolled eyes back.
Yeah, because you can imagine the family that's asked us to go in and help. They're spooked anyway. They're quite anxious about the whole thing. And then if you have a dramatic thing like Marilyn did with the trance mediumship, it just raises the anxiety levels even further. And these people thinking, what have I done letting these people in my house?
Wow. So the good spooks from Simon.
Yeah.
Did they adopt you after?
I think so. I worked with Simon for a couple of 3 years. In fact, since he died about 5 years ago. I often get him to come in and help out. He's particularly gifted, so the more vicious and violent poltergeist cases, the nastier they are, the better Simon likes it. So if I get a particularly difficult one,
he's in there.
I get in touch with him, and he makes all the arrangements, and I just have to go out to the house and play the role of being the person here in the physical world who answers the phone and does emails and talks to people and I could sort of watch what the spooks are doing. And sometimes the spooks might ask me to do something like shut up and don't say anything, or go and stand in that doorway over there, or look behind you, or something like that. So it's pretty easy work for me.
Wow, that's a interesting way of working.
Yeah.
Delegating it.
Yeah.
To the good spooks. So what are some of the things that people report to you in terms of hauntings?
Well, the hauntings, in a haunting situation where there's very little poltergeist activity, the most common one in a survey that Dr. Lance Storm from Adelaide Uni, Lance and I are doing this survey of clearing haunts and poltergeistry, and the one question everyone answers yes to is when you're in the haunted house, do you have the sense you're being watched? And do you have the sense when you're in the house that your mood and thoughts and behaviour are influenced or affected? And everyone says yes to that, because they notice when they leave the house, they notice the difference. So the haunters are usually, there's usually a dozen or 15 of them. They're not very bright, not well educated, they're confused, they're anxious, they're depressed, and they do attention-seeking things like switching the lights on and off. They might open and close doors or drawers, just kind of, or scratching on the wall, that kind of stuff. And they're easy to clear indeed, because they you just get the good spooks to come in and get them to go to the light. It's very easy to do. Take it an hour at the most and you're finished.
Okay, wow. Well, when people start to have these hauntings happen to them, what do they usually do before they actually get to you, before they call you?
Well, typically... did I push something there?
Oh, no.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Typically what happens is the most common thing is somebody moves into a house, they've just rented it or bought it.
Okay.
And if a family member is psychic, they usually notice straight away, because in any family there might be one or two people who are a bit psychic. But if nobody's psychic, they're probably not aware that the place is haunted.
Yes.
Psychic people attract psychic phenomena.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So in any house, usually the females are psychic, generally speaking, and they'll notice little things. They'll hear somebody rapping on the wall, or they'll hear footsteps in the hallway that come from nowhere and go nowhere. They might, out the corner of their eyes, see someone, a man or a woman, a ghost of a person. That's quite common. So it's just little things like that. And then the poltergeistry, poltergeist, the German word, means noisy spirit. Well, sometimes poltergeists move things, or they open and close doors, or they switch lights on and off, those kind of small psychokinetic things. And then usually there's a debate. The females, the psychic ones say, oh, we're haunted, and the men say, oh, don't be silly. And so that goes on for a while, and then, as in the case in Bankstown, where the man who's an engineer gets touched on his backside.
Oh, yes.
Because engineers are very black and white people. Engineering is very black and white. It's either right or it's wrong.
Uh-huh.
And so when somebody experiences that directly themselves, they know it's real, and then who are you going to call?
Yeah, exactly. Would they kind of try and check whether it's a draft or... Yeah,
they go through all the usual things of, was it caused by a draft? Or I was talking to a fellow the other day, and he said he's got a terrace house in Sydney, and when he's got the back door open and the front door open, there's this gale blows through the house, which is great on a hot day because it cools the place down. But he said on this occasion... there's a knock on the front door, so he opens the front door because the fellow's delivering a pizza. At the same time, there's a gust of wind blows through the house, and it lifts in the loft, there's a little manhole cover, and the wind blew this manhole cover off the inside of the ceiling, and at the same time, the smoke alarm went off.
Oh,
so,
okay.
And I said, well, Yeah, you've got a strong wind blowing through the house.
Yes.
And that lifts the manhole cover in the loft. And on that strong wind, there's some smoke, which sets off the alarm. And the pizza guy closes the door and it all stops. So you've got to work through that.
Yes. Okay, yeah, great. So, you try and find out other explanations first.
Yeah. And usually what I look for when I go to a home or meet people for the first time is get a history of who's got a history of psychic experiences. Mm-hmm. And so that tells you they're psychic.
Yes.
And so they're attracting the ghosts and poltergeists, because the ghosts and poltergeists can see and hear and think clearly, and they know they're having an influence on the psychic people because they get an emotional response from the psychic people, whereas the non-psychic people don't respond. So then the psychic people become the focus. They become the victims.
Right.
They get all the attention, and that frightens them if they don't know what's going on.
Yes.
And they think, well, am I going crazy? So you can see that if that goes on for a long time, there's potential for long-term for mental illness to emerge from that.
Okay. That must be quite disturbing for that person.
Yeah. So they ask the usual questions of me, and I answer all the questions. I say, no, you're not psychotic. You're fully functioning in the world. You're managing a family. You've got a job. What your experience is psychic phenomena, and it's normal for psychic people to have those experiences. There's nothing to worry about. You just got to learn to deal with it and get used to it, because it's part of your day from here on in.
Okay. Well, yeah, is it because it's just no fun when like if the people are not psychic, do the ghosts, because the ghosts can't get to them, it's just no fun, so they don't continue?
Yeah, that's right. If you had a house full of people that were not psychic, and even if the house was haunted, and there's one case of this just recently been published in Washington State in America. This young couple rented a house, a 7-year-old house. They had 5 tenants in 7 years, and all the previous tenants described the house as a hellhole. So this young couple, both IT specialists, none of them psychic, no history of psychic experiences. They noticed all the psychokinetic stuff, like the furniture being moved around, and really obvious stuff. So they, being IT specialists, they got the whole house wired with every known surveillance gadget. But they themselves are not psychic. So it's an interesting case where 2 people who are not psychic are involved in a haunted house.
Right. So did anything happen with all the wirings, or nothing happened because they weren't psychic?
I'm not sure what the final outcome of that is. We'll have to wait and see, because the fellow, he's in Washington State on the west coast of America, and he emailed me and wanted me to help him. And he said, I live in Bothell, WA. So I thought, that must be a little town in West Australia that I'd never heard of. And I emailed us, give me your phone number, because you've got to talk to them. And so no, WA is Washington State. I said, well, listen, sport. I don't think there's too much I can do for you.
Oh, interesting. I have heard this though, like a house is haunted, and the tenants in there that are psychic experience all these hauntings, and then they get out because they're so frightened, and then there'll be other people that move in and they don't see much, or they might just see flickering of the lights, and that's it. Yeah. Interesting how it all works.
The really obvious psychokinetic things, like you come home and you find the furniture's been rearranged, or you put something down on the table, and when you look around next time it's gone, and then you find it in the bathroom or in the garage, that kind of thing. That's attention-seeking behaviour. It's the spooks saying, hey, I need help. Can you do something? Can you help me? Get someone to sort this out for us. That's what all that behaviour is about.
Okay.
Yeah.
that they want help.
Yeah, they're confused because if you when people die, I know this from my own out-of-body experiences. When we die, our bodies die, but we can still we survive.
Yes.
And we can think clearly and see and hear everything that's going on. So it's very confusing. So if you're a Christian and you die and what you're experiencing when you're dead doesn't match what the church told you, it's very confusing.
Okay.
And if you've got a science degree and you're dead, death is supposed to be oblivion, and what you're experiencing is not oblivion. It's also very confusing. So what's going on? It's attention-seeking behaviour. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. These lost souls.
Yeah.
So a lot of confusion. Are there some poltergeists that are just mischievous and just want to frighten people because they get the jollies of it?
Yeah, the worst poltergeist cases, which have been several of them really well documented. The poltergeists in those cases it's usually a criminal, and the behaviour just makes no sense at all unless you understand criminal behaviour. They're bullies. They like to frighten people. The more scared the people are, the more kicks the poltergeist bully gets out of it. He enjoys tormenting and frightening people. That's what it's all about. But sometimes these poltergeists are very intelligent and they've learned street skills with computers and phones. And they can manipulate computers and phones and frighten people even more. But that's essentially what's going on. And so people get very frightened, but I know not to be frightened. I never show any fear because I know I can see these poltergeists psychically. So I lock onto them and make sure that they know that I see them. That just makes them angrier. And then the good spooks arrive and they just out-psych the bad spooks. They just the way the good spooks do it, they arrive in overwhelming numbers and they're vastly more intelligent and they generate a lot of emotion. So there's no talking, as in an exorcism where the Catholic priests rant on and it doesn't work. The way the poltergeists get cleared is the good spooks arrive and radiate the energy of peace and love and kindness and just calm everybody down. And the bad spooks realise immediately that they've never had an experience like this before. They've never been confronted by powerful spiritual beings like this before, and they don't quite know what to make of it. So over a little while, the good spooks calm them down, and the bad spooks realise it's a no-win situation. There's nowhere to run to, there's nowhere to hide, and why don't you go to the light? And once they've been to the light, they never want to come back except to thank me, which does happen sometimes.
Oh, that's amazing. I really like it because there's some sort of evolvement or some sort of helping them grow.
Yeah, it's the evolution of consciousness. And when you think about all the millions of people in the last 40 years who died in hospital emergency room, they've been in a lot of pain. They die and suddenly they're on the ceiling and the pain's left behind, but they can see and hear and think clearly. And when they're resuscitated, they say that they went to the light, and being in the light was just so wonderful they didn't want to come back. But the good spooks say to them, hey, you've got to go back, it's not your time yet. You've got to think, who's going to take care of the kids? You've got all this unfinished, unresolved issues, so they're back in their body again. And it's a totally life-changing, overwhelming, life-transforming experience.
Wow.
So they become the sort of prototypical future humans. So that has the effect on the bad spooks, and just occasionally a bad spook will come back and thank me profoundly for doing a kindness to him. So it's all about kindness. It's not like an exorcism, which is the Catholic exorcism is all about violence. And in the last 30 years, some 30 people have died during exorcism. And this is work by Professor Sarah Ferber at the University of Wollongong. She's done research on that. So the way that I work, nobody gets hurt, nobody gets killed. It's much better.
Yes. It looks really exhausting, the way the Catholic priests or the Jesuits or how they do it.
Yeah.
I think I did read some records from what they've done with the exorcisms, and someone described that every time they do it, a little part of them, a bit of their humanness gets taken away bit by bit, and it just sounds really exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah, the worst thing about the Christian Catholic exorcism is it doesn't work. From all that I've read, the success rate would be no more than you'd expect by chance.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And with people dying, often by the stupidity of the priests or the clergy. And so, you just don't go there.
Oh. Yeah, it's interesting. Why doesn't it work? I mean, is it that the challenging the entity, makes it worse, or why?
Well, when you think about what the Catholic priest is doing, he's saying novenas and reciting the Rituale Romanum over and over and over again. And so it's the priests fighting the bad spooks. So the priests are in the physical dimension, and they can have no effect on the bad spooks who are in the non-physical dimension. So that's why you get the good spooks who are in the non-physical dimension to come in and deal with it. That's how it works.
Okay, makes sense. So you've had some cases where you've done some exorcisms yourself, if we could use that word, or removal of attachments, and you were telling me about, we won't say his real name, but this man had some attachment to him.
Oh yeah, that's this was a possession case of a young man who was in his early 30s, and I'd never done a possession case before, but essentially it's the same problem: haunted people, haunted place. It's the same problem. And this young man, he developed when he was in primary school, he developed a relationship with some friendly spooks. And over time, and this, when I researched it, this is the pattern in possession cases. It develops in childhood, and over time the amount of influence increases. So this poor chap had lost jobs because the entity would have him say the wrong thing to customers, so he'd be fired. And this young man had involuntary body movements where his fists were so tightly clenched that his fingernails dug into the palm of his hands till they bled. And he had lots of jerks and involuntary movements. And poor chap was at his wit's end. But he had insight. He understood that he wasn't mentally ill, that he was haunted. He's controlled by this entity. So we had a conversation with the entity. Myself and another AIPR member, Ian Denker, interrogated this young man, or rather interrogated the entity, because the young man could relay the responses. We'd ask a question of this entity, who was called David, and the young man would relay the entity's responses. And after 3 hours of this, absolutely exhausted, we were getting nowhere. The entity is a narcissistic psychopath with stunning lack of empathy or compassion. We're just getting nowhere. So I thought, well, we'll have to think up another way of dealing with this. And so I thought up a few ideas and ran the ideas past the good spooks, and didn't get much of a response. And then the last idea I came up with got an enthusiastic response from the good spooks. Yeah, do that. So what I did one morning, because I meditate for an hour every morning, and after meditation I locked on to this entity called David, and because one time when I was interviewing the young man, holding eye contact with him, the eyes would change, and suddenly the young man's not in his body anymore. This entity's staring back at me, and it was really quite chilling. At first I wondered, is this the young man or is this the entity? So I finally worked out that it was the entity. So I locked eyes with him, so finding him psychically anywhere was easy. So I locked onto him, and then I had the good spooks arrive and surround him. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of good spooks in every direction, above and below, all radiating a love of peace and warmth and affection and kindness. And he was just overwhelmed. He knew the game was up. And he wouldn't look me in the eye anymore. He turned his back on me and walked away and off into the distance somewhere. And I said to him, look, if you want to improve your behaviour, just ask for help, ask the good spooks and they'll help you. And I knew the game was up. So after I'd finished that, I made notes in my diary. I phoned the young man, left a message for him. And 3 weeks later he phoned back and he said, he's gone. And I said, oh yeah. And when did he go? Oh, 3 weeks ago. I said, good. Because sometimes these entities, same in haunted house cases, sometimes they'll go away for a while and you think it's all over, and then they come back just to annoy you and torment you a bit more. So that was a completely successful depossessing of someone. And it's my first depossession job. And in essence, it's no difference from haunted people, haunted places, the same problem.
Okay, wow, that's really fascinating. So it took a lot of the good spooks to actually radiate that warmth and love for that entity to be overwhelmed and just turn away.
Yeah, the hundreds of thousands of good spooks in every direction, that's just overwhelming numerical superiority. You know, that narcissists, they never think that they could ever be wrong about anything. But this was the most convincing display that you got it wrong, pal. I think that was for effect.
Oh, wow. So he never came back? The entity never came back to the person?
No. Yep. No, the young man's been free of that. He's back with his family. He was worried because the entity was threatening to harm his 12-year-old daughter and causing other problems. So that's all ended now. It's all stopped.
Wow. Well, you're doing a really good job there, Rob.
It's not me, it's the good spooks.
They're the good spooks.
Yeah, I'm just here in the physical world, helping out.
Okay. Wow. So have you got you've been talking about doing some paranormal experimentation, setting something up. Do you want to talk a bit more about that?
I had the idea for a long time that there's a lot of, in people's minds, is psychic stuff real? And because you can read about it, and if you're not psychic and read about it, you just dismiss it and you say that's impossible, it's nonsense. But if you had psychic experiences and you read about other psychic experiences, you think, yeah, well, it's probably real. So what I thought would be useful would be to actually run courses where people can come in groups and do psychic stuff. So they can bend spoons in a group, or they can tilt tables in a group, or that kind of thing. So then they'll know it's real. Because I've run table tilting groups in the past, and we have people come and sit in for the first time. Often they're mental health professionals, psychologists like yourself, and other people, and they're just freaked out when a table takes off spinning around the room, and they can see that it's genuine. It deconstructs consensus reality for them immediately. So it seems like nobody's ever done this before in a sort of organised way, where people can come and do psychic stuff like remote viewing the future, or remote viewing people. Where are they now? Describe the location. That kind of thing. So it seems like a good idea, and I've put it to the committee of the AIPR, and they're all excited about it. They think it's a good idea. So hopefully we'll get that started sometime soon.
And would that be in Sydney?
Yeah, it'd be in Sydney, because I live in Sydney. I live right next to the old Gladesville Psychiatric Hospital, which is very haunted, and there's over 1,200 unmarked graves right there. So people can walk through the old Gladesville Hospital and tune into some kind of psychic reality. Seems like a good place to do it.
Yeah, definitely very appropriate. Wow. Yeah, I'll be signing up for that whenever I'm in Sydney.
Oh, good.
I look forward to it. So how do people find you if they need help with hauntings?
Being with the Australian Institute of Parapsychological Research, I think I'm the oldest and longest serving member. So I've been there 30-something years, and I'm on their website. And so I think when people are looking for someone to clear their haunted house, they look at parapsychology groups and Christian clergy and whoever else, mediums, trance mediums. Anyone who's psychic can be taught how to do this. If you're psychic, you can be taught everything you need to know. But if you're not psychic, there's no hope for you.
Oh dear, I was hopeful. Right, okay, yeah, there's such a fascinating field. I think we could spend all day talking about it. Yeah, thank you so much, Rob, for talking with us. And Rob is going to be a speaker at the Real Ghostbusters of Australia conference happening on the 25th of May of this year at the Abbotsford Convent in Melbourne, Australia. So it's actually run over 3 days of activity. So on the 24th of May, we have a ghost tour, and Rob will be there. All the speakers will be there to give them their insights and maybe a demonstration of how they sense things. And then, yeah, the 25th of May, Saturday, is the conference. We have 5 speakers. Ghostbusters from different states of Australia, as well as 1 paranormal investigator. And then we have a networking function in the evening. And then on the Sunday, we have workshops presented by the speakers. So Rob will be doing a workshop and called Poltergeist and Disturbances and Hauntings, How to Clear Space. But what if you're not psychic? Can you learn to be psychic?
I think so. I think so. Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove wrote a book, published, I think it was his PhD thesis in 1986 on psychic, or psi development systems. And he lists the way in which people become psychic spontaneously. And then there's also, you can also develop that ability. But it's most people that are psychic, I think they come into the world and they were psychic in the other lives, and so it's just a natural progression, part of the evolution of consciousness.
Great. Okay, great. Thanks again, Rob. It's a pleasure having you here. And if you want more of Rob, come to the conference. Tickets are at Eventbrite. Just go onto Eventbrite site and Google Ghostbusters Melbourne, or visit melbourneevents.net. So just melbourneevents.net, and there's more information there. Thank you for listening.